Good morning, everyone. My name is Katia Delgado. I am with Polk County Roads and Drainage in Florida, where I am over the asset management system. And so I'd like to thank, first of all, for the invitation for Polk County to come. This is our first appearance here, and I certainly hope it'll be the first of many. And so thank you very much for that invitation and the opportunity to just share with you the message of how Polk County has come into pavement preservation and pavement management and what that journey has been. I don't really intend to get a lot into treatments per se, because really when we talk with other agencies, other local agencies that contact us, what they're interested in asking us is, how did you get the ball rolling? How were you able to start to build the momentum to get your program moving? And so that's kind of where I want to go with this today. And so as I was getting ready for this presentation, I came across this quote that's attributed to Winston Churchill that I think really just sums up what the county's journey has been in establishing a pavement management and pavement preservation program. And basic line, it is better to take some action than no action at all. If you're just going to start with one treatment because you don't have anything, start with one treatment. If you have software but you don't have treatments, start with the software, but start somewhere, because every year that you let go by as an agency is a year that your network is digging itself deeper and deeper into the hole. And so Winston Churchill says it's better to do something than to do nothing while waiting to do everything, right? So if we wait for all the pieces of the puzzle and wait till it's just right, that's a lot of time that we're wasting. So real quick, in case you're not familiar with Polk County, we're located in the heart of Central Florida, right between the Tampa Bay area and Orlando. The I-4 corridor runs east to west right through the heart of our county. We're the fourth largest county by landmass in the state of Florida. We have just over 2,700 centerline miles in the county that are county owned and maintained. But of the total of both combining local cities, state and county miles that cross through the county, we own and maintain approximately 61% of the network. In terms of the breakup and of the functional breakup of that network and the challenges that we face, as you see, just over 50% are local residential roads. So we do, contrary to some agencies in Florida that surround us, Polk County does maintain public local residential roads, and they do account for a large chunk of our network. Some of the challenges that we face, everyone in this room is pretty familiar with most of them, but some of them are a little bit more unique to Florida and specifically Polk County. So obviously funding, everyone knows about that. Growth encroachment, because we have the Tampa Bay urban area and Orlando area basically squeezing in on Polk County from both sides. High water tables and sandy soils and very thin asphalt layers. I was a little surprised yesterday, keeping in mind that most of the people that presented yesterday are from DOTs. They're talking about 4 inches, 6 inches of asphalt. That is unheard of on a county road. We are lucky if we get 3 inches on some of the roads that used to be DOT that are now in our management. And so that really limits what we can do in terms of treatment. And also the county, because of its location in the I-4 corridor, it is a prime real estate, and we have ridiculously number volumes of heavy vehicle traffic. So that's what I call basically the 1-2 punch in terms of pavements. Our pavements are, for the most part, roads that have been built up historically from dirt surfaces, clay roads, built up to asphalt roads today, and they were not prepared. They don't have prepared bases for the heavy vehicle truck traffic that we're seeing, and certainly the urban growth that we're seeing. And you contribute that to thin asphalt layers, it's a challenge. I'm offering this timeline just as a brief summary so you can kind of see the span of the time that we've been talking about. And I'm going to go in a little bit more into detail. But as you see, I mean, we've had concerted efforts all dating all the way back to 2006 until where we are today. And I did put the symbol of COVID up there because we're going to talk a little bit about how our pavement preservation program really stepped up and was able to prove its mettle during COVID. So before 2006, for the most part, our program, we did have an annual paving program. For the most part, it was driven by citizen complaint and the best engineering judgment of whoever was in charge of setting up that list. The image you see on the middle, on the bottom, is actually a scanned PDF of handwritten notes that I found of a gentleman that used to occupy that position, where he left his sort of recipe for putting together the annual paving list for whoever was going to step into his shoes. And so what's interesting is just to see there was a concerted effort, even back then, to sort of set a systematic and a structured way or approach to preparing the paving list. At this time, we're basically using traditional mill and inlay treatments. There were some sporadic treatments, preservation treatments, but they really didn't have a lot of backing and didn't gain much acceptance, although ironically, they did perform very well. Then in 2006 was like the big first evolution that our system took. Number one, we realized the importance of knowing what we had and where it was. And so we began to collect our system in GIS. This was done internally by staff from our survey department. And we also adopted the PACER rating manual system. So on approximately a rate of every 2 years, we began doing condition rating based off of the PACER manual. If you're not familiar with it, it's a 1 to 10 scale where it has a guide of a series of photo images to kind of guide you what those, along with the different distresses, what a road looks like, if it's a 6, if it's a 7, et cetera, et cetera. And so we began to do that condition rating approximately every 2 years. We're still basically stuck with, in terms of treatment with mill, inlay, and overlay. And project selection, for the most part, was based off of worst first, which really, for local agencies, was, the common theme before pavement preservation started to pop up. And so if you look at the pie chart, with a stable budget that usually fluctuated between $10 and $12 million annually, we were averaging about 70 centerline miles in treated roads with that budget. And again, just strictly traditional mill and inlay projects. Then in 2015 was the next step in our evolution. So county elected officials and the county manager's office stepped up and said, we need to look into pavement preservation. We need to make that money that we're allotting yearly to go and stretch even further. And so we had the mandate and the backing from our elected officials and upper management. We put out a multi-year annual contract with pavement preservation treatments, ranging from rejuvenation, the slurries, micros, thin hot mix asphalt, all the way down to reconstruction projects, full depth reclamation, and CIP. But not only did we put out the contract for those treatments, we actually said as an agency, we are going to allocate a minimum of 15 to 20% of our budget yearly to pavement preservation treatments. And so at this point, we started using the PCI ratings that we had from PACER to rank projects and, in our best judgment, try to pair them together with the best treatment. And initially in this first year, we also relied heavily on the industry. The industry also, they don't want their treatments to fail. I think some people mentioned yesterday, a successful project, no one talks about it, but a tiny failure is everywhere. And so they don't want their products and their projects to be the failing one either. So, as you're starting to get your feet on the ground and trying to get into this world of pavement preservation, we found that it was very helpful in the beginning for us to lean on them for guidance and information as well. So if you look at now at the pie chart, same budget, $12 million. Again, we dedicated 19% to pavement preservation treatments that first year, and we did 110 centerline miles. So up from 70. That definitely caught our elected officials' attention. The other thing that we did was put out an RFP to contract a consulting firm to help us formalize a pavement management system that included analytical software as well. Because now we had the treatments, so now we have a big network. It's a little complex to do this on Excel spreadsheets, so we wanted an analytical tool that would give us that extra step in preparing our work plans. And so that was the next step in our evolution. Between 2016 and 2018, we paired with a consulting company, and we did two things. Number one, we changed our rating system from the PACER system to FHWA's LTAP-based system. We did some modifications based on some of the stresses that are more prevalent in Florida and Polk County specifically. We continue to do it on a 2-year cycle. The collection, it's done by internal staff. I have 5 inspectors that each one is assigned to the same area of the county, so they see these same roads year after year. We also then configured an analytical software, which we evaluated 3 different softwares, and in our case, we decided to go with Agile Assets. And this is the software that we now use to prepare our annual work plans. And so we're able to put out multi-year plans, and we kind of adopted the policy where we said, year 1 is pretty much written in stone. Year 2 and 3 are forecasted, and so when citizens call us now, we're also able to give them a better idea of when their roads are coming up for treatment. So if I put all those together, then with the last pie chart on your right, I believe, is what we've been averaging since we combined our preservation contracts together with the analytical software to help us really pick the right road, the right treatment at the right time. And so you see we've gone from 70 centerline miles before 2015. Right now we're putting towards preservation, if you include the rejuvenation as well, we're putting approximately 56% towards preservation of our budget. Our budget has also increased. We were able to show our elected officials what we suspected all along, but we really had no way of proving, which is that although we were lucky or sort of blessed to have a consistent annual budget, we are still underfunded for the needs of our network. And so we were able to get an increase. Right now we're at $18 million annually, and we average about between 160 and 180 centerline miles with that level of budgeting, really because we're diversifying the treatments that we use and leaning heavily on pavement preservation. Some words that are up in the air lately, obviously, risk and resiliency. So when you start answering the what if questions, you're actually working towards minimizing risk. And so what happens, for example, if upper management suddenly doesn't want to prioritize pavement preservation? Elected officials change, policies can change, staff can change. So what happens if suddenly pavement preservation isn't a priority? What happens when things don't go as planned, which was the case of COVID, right? So let's have a look at these very quickly. This first line, green line, is our current level of funding, $18 million. And the analysis of the software, which is called, this particular is an optimized analysis, where we basically tell the software, I have $18 million, you tell me where to spend it, how to spend it, and what to spend it on. We can see our PCI is dropping because, again, we know we're underfunded. But if I take that same level of funding, $18 million, and now I tell the software, you know what, I'm not going to do any preservation at all, we see a dramatic drop in the PCI level. So it goes from it's almost a 10-point drop, if I'm not mistaken, simply by not prioritizing pavement preservation. The orange line in the middle is what we call the Coveted Scenario. So when COVID, those initial months of uncertainty, and this may have been the experience of a lot of other agencies, we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know how our revenues were going to be affected. It was, people weren't traveling, gas tax wasn't there, what was going to happen. And so initially, we were instructed to start looking for places where we can cut. And obviously the pavement management program that we have, because we have a big chunk of money in our budget, was sort of like an easy target. We were able to quickly, with the analysis software that we have, put together the analyses that shows the orange line, what would happen if initially we got a third of our budget cut. So we would go from $18 million down to $12 million for a period of 3 years. And then gradually over the rest of the course of the analysis period, which is 7 more years, we would build back up to the $18 million that we currently have in funding. And so again, we see that the PCI is dropping, not as dramatically as if we do not prioritize preservation. So it is close. We were going to take an impact with the budget cut, but it was closer to our current level of funding as long as we keep preservation on the table. And that was a very powerful, persuasive tool when we spoke with management and our elected officials. If you're curious of what we really need in terms of maintaining our current level of funding, for our network size and our current condition, it's about $35 million yearly. Now this graph, I apologize, I know it's a lot of spaghetti, but I'm hoping you'll bear with me here, right? PCI, it's a wonderful tool. People are familiar with, for the most part, people are familiar with it. When you talk with citizens and you tell them, I have a scale of 100 to 0, where 100 is the best and 0 is the worst, most people can wrap their brain around that, even if they don't know what pavement preservation and pavement management is. But really, when you pair that together, especially when you're talking with management and elected officials, when you pair that together with how is that going to hit us in the pocket, that's where the message goes home. That's really when you get people's attention. And so if you look at the solid green line, again, that's our current level of funding, where we're prioritizing pavement preservation. The dashed green line below represents the annual backlog build. So we see our backlog is growing as the analysis period goes forward because our PCI is dropping. We know that, right? We're underfunded. If we looked at the gray line, which we said was same level of funding, $18 million, but no preservation is being prioritized, look at the jump that the backlog takes. We're talking about, at the end of the analysis period, almost $82 million. That's 4.5 years worth of budget that would be lost with the same level of funding if we do not prioritize preservation. And then in the Coveted scenario, which is the dashed yellow line, our backlog, our accumulated backlog at the end of the analysis period, where again, we said we're going to take a third of a budget cut and then slowly build back up to our current level of funding, but keeping preservation on the table. The accumulated backlog is a difference of just over $46 million. So that's about 2.5 or 3 years worth of funding, of project funding. So when we showed this, we didn't lose a single penny of our budget, because they understood that if we gave into that knee-jerk reaction in the moment to save money, down the line, we were going to be digging ourselves into an even deeper hole than we are now. So what's next for Polk County? Right now, we are working on redefining some decision trees, and we're looking at our degradation curves again, because this is our 3rd year of pavement condition data with our new system. So we're going to try to adopt those models a little bit closer to our actual network's data. The decision trees, it's good to go back and look at them, just because maybe we've learned over this, of course of time, some treatments work better for us than others, or for example, we're not doing right now any micro on collectors, and we did a test project, which is looking very good. So we're thinking of writing that into the decision tree for micro to be an option for our collector roads as well. We're also looking to begin establishing network goals, condition goals for our network, and using the data that we've been gathering all this time to make better decisions, not only for us, but for our maintenance crew. One example of that is we were able to pair the incidence of edge cracking with the need for shoulder maintenance. And so we were able to provide our maintenance crews GPS located areas that might need a little bit more attention to shoulder maintenance because of the high incidency and high level of edge cracking. And obviously quality control. I mean, your system is only as good as the information you put in, right? I had a professor who always told us garbage in, garbage out. So some takeaway points that I wanted to just emphasize a little bit more, just in case. At the local agency policy level, you don't need to have all the pieces in place to begin your program. Start with what you have. If it's one treatment, start with one treatment and grow your system slowly. Educate the public, educate your elected officials, your upper management. When we did some of these treatments, for example, when we did chip seal, we encountered some disagreement with citizens, but we were able to, at the end, kind of equate to them. You know, when you talk to someone and you say, hey, if you put off maintaining your vehicle versus doing your typical, you know, oil and filter changes, what's going to be more expensive down the line? So when you kind of equate it to them to something tangible in the real world, it goes a long way to getting acceptance and getting that message and getting the push that you need for your program. At the public works level, so in our department level, some takeaway points would be know what you have and what condition it is. And depending on how complex or how simple your network might be, that might be an Excel sheet, or it might be, you know, a GPS. Esri has I believe, a wonderful tool for GPS collection for public works. It's pretty much set up. Have tools also to help you perform the analyses. Again, that can be as complex or as simple depending on your network. The Georgia DOT preservation tool that was presented earlier, that's basically a decision tree. It guides you through. You say, what is the condition of the road? And it guides you through, asking you some simple questions till you get to the end to a recommended treatment. That's a decision tree. EDC4, if you're not familiar with it, the Pavement Preservation Initiative by Federal Highway a couple of years ago, they also, I think they have an Excel worksheet that helps you do project costs analyses for different preservation treatments as well. So there are tools out there. You don't have to go for a Mercedes-Benz in terms of software if your system, if your network doesn't require it. Identify a champion for support. And I think it's important to identify a champion at the level of your department, but also identify a champion, if you can, in upper management and an elected official. And other people I know have been talking about that. That is very important. Contracts and specifications. Specifications aren't all created equal. We talked about that earlier as well. In terms of contracts, I do want to talk a little bit when we have a partnership with your procurement department, because when we started to get an increase in funding, all of a sudden we had more money. Well, we found out our contractor couldn't produce at the level for us to spend all the money we had. So even though the analysis was telling us, spend all this money, do it on here, we physically couldn't do the work. And so we were able to work with our procurement department to revise our contracts. And right now we have one contract that is in the form of award to all. So we have the ability of having multiple contractors doing the same type of work simultaneously in different places of the county. Structure and continuity. If the current pavement management director, well, current pavement manager for Polk County, which I am not, I used to be, I'm not. But if the current pavement manager for Polk County suddenly leaves, this program can't die with that person. This person can't just go away into a drawer with that person. There has to be a structure in place so that whoever steps into his shoes will say, oh, this is how the county does it. Okay, this is where I'm going to start day one, and I'm going to work forward from here. The same thing with your upper management elected officials. That's the importance of educating them. They will change over time as well. And so whoever comes in, you want to bring them into the fold, not have them come in to disrupt what you've already been able to set up. The last part is your system has to be an evolving one. It is not something that you bought software off the shelf one day and set it up and I'm done. I have a system. No, it has to evolve. And it evolves through gathering more information, through revisiting configurations, through reviewing treatments. Their materials are always changing, specifications are improving, techniques are changing, so your system has to be able to grow and adapt along with it. And that is pretty much all I had. So if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a great presentation. I was curious how many staff you have dedicated to pavement management in Polk County. Is it just the pavement management engineer, or are there multiple staff?
So we've put together, we have the pavement manager. He deals directly in terms of the analyses for the work plan preparation. Then under my department of asset management, I have 5 inspectors that conduct the pavement condition ratings on a bi-yearly basis, every 2 years. And I collaborate also with the pavement manager in preparation for the work plans.
It's awesome that you have dedicated staff for it. A lot of local agencies aren't able to do that. So
yes,
yeah,
thank you. And
job.
It is, I mean, especially in terms of the condition rating, we found that it's fantastic that these same individuals, they're looking at the same roads every, that's their area. They are familiar with it. When something changes, they catch it like that. Yes, there's consistency. Yes, thank you.
As far as your program goes, do you have, I know, like on a bad road, I mean, a bad road needs rehab, but as far as like on the preservation, do you have certain, I guess the question is, do you have certain triggers or a certain point or a certain number where you initiate preservation, and what type of preservation you use?
Yes, actually, if we have a few minutes, I left a few slides that illustrate an example in our decision tree. I left them to the side because I didn't know if we were going to have time to get to them. When we sat down to configure that software with the consultant, we had a round table. We had engineers, we had inspectors, and we all sat down and we said, what do we do as an agency? When do we see a road and say, that road is a good micro candidate? And so then we had that discussion and we equated it back to, we call it in the software, it's called the structural index. It's a component that takes from the PCS evaluations that my staff does, and it grabs like-minded deficiencies. So distresses that are kind of originated by the same type of action. And so based on different ranges of that structural index, it'll trigger one or more recommended treatment. But it also looks at things, let me zoom out of the decision tree. So I'm gonna give you a quick example. We have a lot of problems with soil cement in our county. There's nothing structurally wrong with the base. It's just that because of the high cement content in the base, the reflective cracking comes up through the pavement. And for years, we were overlaying these roads. And if you look at the unit price per square yard that I have there for overlay, it's about $5.35 a square yard. And the cracks were coming back at about 3 to 6 months. We knew that. We knew that was going to happen. So then when we sat down to do these decision trees, we said, well, what if we do a micro instead of the overlay? We're going to get the same result. We know the cracks are going to come through, but we're going to save money, and the roads are looking black, and I hate to say it, but our citizens, that's a lot of why they call. They see the cracks. In Florida, our pavements bleach white because of the sun. And so a bleached pavement for a lot of our citizens is a bad pavement, when really structurally there's nothing wrong with it. So in our decision tree, let me see if I get it to run here. The first thing it looks at is the functional classification. In this case, I'm focusing on arterials, right? And then it looks at that structural index that I told you. So if it's between a 40 and a 60 in this case, then it looks at it, is it a closed or open section? Is it curbed or not? So can I mill or can I not mill? Is it a freight route? Do I have heavy vehicle traffic? Remember here in this particular one, I'm talking about collectors. And then we looked at the soil cement. So if it's a freight route and it's soil cement, I can't mill into that. because I'm going to get into the base, I'm going to fracture that base even more, and I'm going to make a bigger mess. So we decided to do a thin overlay in that case. If it is not soil cement, then we might do a mill, a crack relief, which is a layer of aggregate, and asphalt surface on that. So that's just an example. But it was a consensus of, you know, engineering staff and our inspectors and people that are out on these projects, putting their eyes on the road saying, when do we really, as an agency, when would we do this? And it has to make sense.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.